Good to see everybody here bright and early after a big night in Nashville last night. So we got a fun session this morning. I'll explain what it is in just a minute, but we have a sponsor for breakfast, and since they paid for breakfast, they get to run a cool little video for you guys to watch. So this is Epcon franchising.
Are you ready to catch the wave in 55 plus home building? At Epcon Franchising, we work to support home builders like you to build homes, neighborhoods, and lifestyle that is extremely popular with the 55 plus demographic. The 55 plus market is overflowing with potential, and by working with over 75 entrepreneurs across more than 25 states, we are helping our franchise builders ride this wave in the residential real estate market. At Epcon, we offer copyrighted designs and a streamlined approach for home builders to manage the land development and home building process for 55 plus communities. As an Epcon franchise builder, you'll receive access to our business blueprint that has made us a top U.S. home builder year after year. You'll work with our experts in land, marketing, sales, and purchasing using our time-tested processes. Many of our largest franchise builders joined us during the global financial crisis. And although they faced obvious challenges along the way, they've stuck with us over the years, and they've consistently grown their businesses along the way. They were able to catch the wave at the right time.
Everybody here is knowledgeable. Epcon has had such a rich history and have a large network of franchisees that add so much value to the brand. Always looking to innovate, always looking to make things better. So that was one of the main reasons we jumped in.
I'd always thought about doing communities, just felt like didn't have the experience or the know-how to get into something that large, and Epcon paved that way.
Upon investigating everything Epcon had to offer, decided it was a perfect complement to the business that we're doing already and a great way to scale up our company as a whole.
There's a system, there's a process, it's tried and true. That's really why we bought into it. Is, of course, we could have come up with something on our own. It would have taken a long time with a lot of mistakes, and we wanted to shorten our learning curve and jump right into where we wanted to be.
Where else can a small boutique builder join a top 60 builder and have access to all the resources that this company has available?
We can't control the economy, we can't control the housing market, but we can make sure that we have the best products and the best processes to succeed in the marketplace.
At Epcon, we give existing home builders the tools to become dominant players in their local markets.
Ready to dive in? Catch us at Break Service, and let's catch the wave in 55 and up home building.
Awesome. Thanks to Epcon, who's not here, but thank you anyway. So we've got a fun session planned for you this morning. Hopefully we'll keep your interest since it's early in the morning. We're going to be talking about collaborating on luxury tech projects. And so what I did was I assembled this team you see here. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a minute. Actually, I think I have a slide with her. There you go. I'll let them introduce themselves. We are all currently collaborating on a project. So we're going to be talking about process. We're also going to be talking about what it looks like in real life with some real examples of how we work through this process. And hopefully what you can take away from this is an understanding of how to better work with the integration world, how to integrate tech into your projects a little bit more successfully, and some things to think about along the way to make things run a little bit more smoothly. So with that, Greg, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Greg Hardwick. I've been here a few times to Tech Home. Always enjoy it. Always take something home that I didn't know before I left. I'm a custom builder in Orlando, Florida, and we just do one-off custom homes, just on owners' lots where we're either tearing down or just building, fresh in a development like this one is. And then we do whole house renovations, larger renovations.
Stephanie?
I'm Stephanie Weibly from Soco Interiors out of Winter Park, Florida, which is just outside of Orlando. We primarily do high-end luxury residential projects.
Awesome. I'm Kevin Roach. I'm with Bravis. We are a national integrator installing projects from San Francisco to Boca Raton and everywhere in between.
Thanks. And most of you know me already, but I'm Sean Weiner. I'm now the president of Spexy, which is a tech design firm out of Baltimore. I was one of the original founders of Bravos as well, so Kevin and I have a bit of a history together. So I want to talk a little bit about what makes a project successful. So I threw up some ideas here to start the conversation, but I'd like each of you at least to comment on your views on what makes it successful. Kevin, why don't we start with you? We'll go back the other direction here.
Yeah, perfect. A successful project, I think, is when you hit the finish line at the same time. I learned a long time ago, it's about having exceptionally excited clients that get to live in their homes. And that kind of starts with making sure that we have a shared vision and an understanding of what needs to be done so that we can make it there when we can be on budget and on time and kind of keeping everybody happy. That's kind of always my vision of a successful project, is when not only is the client happy, but all the trades that worked on it are happy, the designer's happy, the architect's happy, builder's happy. We've all hit this euphoria on getting to that finish line together.
Does that ever actually happen, that everybody's that happy?
Maybe at the end. Along the way, there's a little rocky sometimes.
For me, it's the collaboration between what the client wants me to create for them and then taking it to the builder and all the trades and it actually creating their dream home and making that work for everyone, that it's an easy process.
Yeah, I agree with Stephanie a little bit. For me, it's since every house is different, we have different architects on pretty much every home, different interior designers almost on some homes. Even a different trade pool, sometimes when you're 2 or 3 deep. And then everybody knows the client is different on every single home. So with all these differences for us, that collaboration is very, very important because we're trying to pull everything that we can out of the brain of the homeowner who's building a home unique to them and their family, and trying to get that information out of them on paper so that we can execute in the field really makes this all work well together.
You're already jumping ahead, but get in.
Oh.
Get in first. So what can we do to ensure this success? Any thoughts on that? I threw bribery in there. Sometimes that works too. But the purpose of this session is really to talk about collaborating and coordinating these projects effectively. Any other thoughts on what we can do to make sure that this happens?
Communicate. Whether you're communicating with the client or you're having individual meetings with the builder and the architects and whatever trade we're trying to get figured out at that point, to me, it's making sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah. I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think communication, right? You can't over-communicate. No. And it's also not just being able to communicate effectively, but it's being able to communicate with a lot of different levels of people, right? So we're obviously talking to a homeowner that may not be as technical as we are. We're talking to architects that are more linear and math-oriented and structure kind of oriented. And then we're talking to trades that have a different level of education and experience, and figuring out how do we make sure that everybody gets that same message so that we can help everyone find success in that.
Yeah, and for me, it's the communication, of course, the collaboration, but then having an internal process where the process is the same for every home, but the way you're getting the information may be different, and the information you're putting up there may be different. So, it's taken us a long time, I think, to not adjust the way we do things to every client, but stay to the process that we've developed over the years, but be adaptable to be able to, take on new designs and new technologies and those types of things, get them out to the field.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So I was asked to create a step-by-step method for you to do this, which was really difficult to do. So this is what I came up with in the process of putting this presentation together. This is shown as a linear process. This is not a linear process. This looks like a timeline. This is not a timeline. This process really are all the steps that are required, and some happen concurrently, some happen sequentially. It's a combination of all these factors, but I'm going to go through each one of them and the importance of them, and you'll see as we go through this how they all sort of interrelate to one another. I also want to tell you, we're going to be talking about a project that we're working on together, and give you some specific examples along the way as well. So not just a lecture on how to build a process, but what that looks like in reality. So going from a vision to a decision is probably the most important point of this entire session today. I think one of the most challenging things, and I think everyone up here, and maybe all of you would agree, is helping a client realize a vision, but helping them define that vision too, and how you make that a reality and keep it within budget, and like Kevin said, make them happy or even euphoric at the end of that project. And we face that challenge with everything we do. We're going to focus on tech today because this is a tech conference. But those decisions and that portion of the work is happening on every project with every element of that home. So you can see there's an idea that becomes a design, that becomes a budget item, that becomes something that creates some sticker shock along the way, right? And I think this happens with almost everything. And you can talk about plumbing and flooring and electric and roofing and framing and concrete and everything else. And then we go back and revisit everything. So we go in this sort of constant loop of going back to design and back to budget and back to design and back to budget and maybe back to ideas again and then back to budget until we finally have a decision. And you can imagine, I'm sure you do, you don't have to imagine, you live it, that every time you do this, you're adding more time and more cost to the project. So the goal is to make this cycle as short as possible. So I'd like you to address, the three of you, in any order that you want to chime in, how you handle reviewing and pricing options early in the project with the client. So this is before the hole's dug, before the plans maybe even are finalized.
Yeah, no, we'll take a conceptual design, and we use, one of those, I don't want to necessarily name names or whatever, but the Construction Online and the Builder Trends of the world, we have a lot of historical data on a lot of homes. So we'll take a conceptual design, we'll kind of match it to a past project, recently past project, and we'll do some preliminary pricing to put a conceptual estimate together for them. And then we walk through every line item in that estimate to either make adjustments. We're cost plus, so everything's pretty much an allowance. Make adjustments in some of the categories, like if we had $50,000 in there for closets, the owner may say, nope, I know I'm gonna spend $100,000 in closets. Stuff like that. You go through the conversation of every line item, every activity, so you kind of have a bottom line that everyone's contributed to and had some input on, and that gets us good buy-in right from the beginning.
And for me, I kind of look to the builder of going, okay, I don't know construction costs. I have an idea, but I don't know dollar for dollar. So I'll say, give me a square foot price for flooring or for closets, for cabinets, countertops. So at least I have somewhat of a guideline. And then I do my best to keep the client within those parameters and not showing them something that's twice as much money a square foot for flooring. They may not necessarily like that and go, no, I really want that. And it's my job to say, okay, but that is going to be outside of your numbers. We may need to back down here in order to maintain your numbers, and or you're going to go over what you think you're going to pay for the house.
I think on the technology side of it, it's oftentimes clients have a really hard time quantifying what that looks like, right? We can ask what a budget is, but they really have no idea. There's no baseline for them to have an understanding of what they're going to spend on it. And so it really starts as an education for us. And so we really focus on exposing our clients to what's possible, letting them kind of see different things. From a Brava's perspective, we have some marketing materials and different items that at least can say, if you're doing some automated window treatments, you should expect to be in this kind of a price range. If you're doing security systems here, theaters can be here. And so we have some general ballpark guidelines there. But more importantly, as we're going through this kind of discovery process with the client and talking about what the possibilities are, we try to quantify what those dollars are as we're going so that we don't get to the end. Similar to how you're talking about budgets, where you're talking about closets and flooring and framing and wood, we're doing that along the way as well, just in our technology side of things, so that when we get to the end, we've had buy-in and understanding along the way, so that hopefully there's not this sticker shock. Because the reality is, you had your little slide a second ago where you were talking about going down this path, and then you're kind of going back, then you're going down the path, and you're just adding layers of glass into like what this scope really looks like. And clients have a really hard time remembering where they actually finished versus what they were hearing at the beginning. And so to be able to get to that quicker, I think you get a better clarity, a better understanding from the client, and a better experience from the client at the end. And you've got to do that along the way by including budget as a conversation in that.
We're going to spend some more time on budgeting too, so I have more questions for you in a minute, but hop through this. So I did want to introduce the project we're working on and give you some background on what this collaboration looks like that we're going to be talking about today. So this is a rendering of the front of the house. I think it's changed a little bit since it was drawn, but this is the gist. This is a property in Florida that Greg is building. Stephanie's the interior designer, and we have not selected an integrator for the project quite yet, but Bravas is in the conversation, which is why Kevin's here talking to us today. So we're going to go through some options up there. I'd just give you an idea that the footers were poured 2 weeks ago. Greg, is that right?
Yep.
So we're just coming up on
all today.
Greg and I started talking about this, about a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
Maybe? So I've been engaged in this project for about a year now. Stephanie got brought in
About a year ago.
And we've been working together for quite a while, it seems, and it's kind of nice to see it coming up and out of the ground. So this is a floor plan, just to give you a rough idea of what the layout of the house looks like. That was 1/8" scale, threw me a little bit too. Not on the screen, it's not, but you get the idea. So this is where we sort of start every project, and I thought this was kind of an interesting way to look at things. This is what a typical project starts as, right? Everyone's got their own vision of what the end result's going to be. I sort of shortchanged the architect since he's not on the panel because he probably wasn't thinking it was a tiny Honda when he started talking about his client. But he had an idea that he was building a car, right? It had to be reliable, it had to be a piece of transportation, it had to get him from point A to point B. The builder had a vision of what it looks like based on what he's historically done, right? He builds, big rock solid SUV type things that are luxurious and beautiful and structurally sound. The interior designer wants to make it beautiful, which is what their job is and why they were brought to the table. The integrator wants to make it cool, right? Most integrators, and I don't want to shortchange the integrators either. I think most of the better integrators understand that there's a compromise between form and function in most of these jobs. And the owner might have had a completely different vision for the project when he started, and it's on them to communicate that initially to their architect, then to the rest of the design team. Because if you don't, you get that.
What is that?
I don't know what that is. I think it's cardboard. I love that picture.
Oh.
There you go.
Yes.
Exactly. So, Stephanie, I'm going to hand you the clicker here. I want to give you some details on the project and talk about how we arrived at some of these decisions and how these decisions have impacted the rest of us on this project. So, just a quick backstory. Early in the process, I was there before Stephanie was. The homeowner was looking at me, and he's a big tech guy. He loves everything technology. He loves everything cool and new and exciting. And we've gone to showrooms. We've been to design houses. We've been everywhere looking at products. And he wanted all these things in all these places, and he didn't have an interior designer on board. And I said, I can't do anything until you've got those design decisions at least underway. So he contacted Greg. I think Greg introduced him to Stephanie, and the rest is history. But we got Stephanie on the design team, and you ramped up pretty quickly.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Especially because they'd already been working on it for a year. So I'd like to say I came in late, even though we weren't going to permit yet or anything, but just trying to get everything pre-planned as much as possible to make it easier for Greg once we do start, that we're not having to back up and relook at things or look at trusses and can we get pockets in. So I sat down with Vishal and his wife and kind of just ran like interview type questions like, how does your family live? Do you entertain a lot? Do you have any live-in help? Do you have any parents living with you? How many children do you have? So it kind of starts gearing me how I'm going to approach the design of the house. And like Sean said, this was a unique project because this client travels a lot. He sees a lot. He likes to go to showrooms. He likes to see everything he possibly can. So he kind of came into us with a lot of ideas, and in particular, wanting really clean ceilings but cool lighting. So I started pulling a lot of different ceiling design options, and through probably 50 or 60 photographs, we narrowed down to these few to kind of take the concept and mix them out throughout the house. Then for the bathrooms, in particular in his like powder baths, he wanted a moment where people were going to go, this is the coolest bathroom I've ever been in. He sent me some pictures from a club in, I think it was in the UK that he had visited, that had all this backlit glass that was etched. And he's like, I love this concept. Where can we use it in the house? So as this has kind of progressed, it's turned into, we're going to take and do colored glass that's completely backlit in his powder bath to make a wow moment. And then just having really unique details and extra storage in each of the bathrooms, but wanting every bathroom to be different from each other, but still feel consistent throughout the house. So these are the kind of so far the designs that we're sticking with right now for the cabinets. And then his great room sitting area place, he has a love of Art Deco. So we're trying to incorporate kind of the curves of Art Deco, but at the same time, bringing in the technology and the LED lighting to make it more modern. Doing floor-to-ceiling fireplaces with, floor-to-ceiling walls with fireplaces and huge TVs because he wants a lot of tech within that great room area where he'll do his primary amount of entertaining. And then again, doing like a lot of cool backlighting and cabinetry to highlight what's going on in those cabinets. And then the client actually brought this one to me. It's a company called MR Walls, and it's carved Corian that's backlit. It's really, really cool in person, and it was my job to kind of find out where can we put it. This concept has moved around the house multiple times, but we're very close to getting into one room that both him and his wife will like, and it won't be overly busy in a common area for everyday use. Now you.
So as you can see from those slides, there's some complexity there, right? So a lot of the elements that you included are beautiful, but they're backlit, so it requires lighting, which also requires a discussion about color, which also requires a discussion about control. There's a lot that goes on in sort of getting these decisions out of that client and coordinating those decisions along the way. I did a similar thing with the client early on. This is a couple pages out of a pretty large document that we went through, just sort of not quite as elegantly as you put it together in your slides, but a description and some photographs conceptually of what he would want to do with that large video wall that you described, with the speakers in the space, whether they're going to be very small form factor or hidden throughout the project. Just getting to these decisions early on. And that was our process as well. So we're very aligned in how we do things. Kevin, I assume that you're similar?
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
Okay.
Got to balance the architecture and the design and the limitations that you have in that and try to figure out how does technology complement that and not take it away. Yeah.
And keep it pretty.
And keep it pretty.
Keep it pretty. and pretty is important. So here's the next piece. So one of the big challenges in this house, because it's so big and there's so many different lighting elements to it, was making sure that the client understood what the lighting was going to look like. And how many of you have seen a lighting plan before? I hope all of you. I didn't see every hand go up, but hopefully you've all seen them.
This was the first time that someone ever came to us and said, who do you use for lighting design? Outside of your lighting, your interior designer, your architect, or your lighting associate at the lighting store. So this was something that Sean and I put our heads together on because you could just tell he was into lighting, right? And he was asking all the right questions, and this is kind of how we moved into this next phase with you. So,
and this client's a builder, so he has the ability to visualize from a floor plan, which is unusual. Not most clients can't do that.
Right.
But even so, when you have little circles and squares and dots on a floor plan, it doesn't always translate to what a well-lit space looks like. So we engaged a company to help us with the design and do some renderings for us. This is one. They actually rendered almost every area of the home, so I don't have time to show you all the slides, but I just wanted to show you an example of this. This is the foyer of the home. So we rendered it dark with no lights on, and we go layer by layer through these. So this is what it would look like with that decorative lighting. What this does to the process, just to give you an idea, in the first 90-minute meeting, maybe 2-hour meeting with the client, going through these renderings, he was able to see what the house is going to look like and make a lot of decisions in a really short period of time. Much more seamless and much faster than anything I've ever done on a set of two-dimensional blueprints, trying to understand what those lighting fixtures are going to be with a lot of different pictures of what it might look like. So we gave a bunch of options in this particular meeting, and Stephanie, you were part of that meeting too.
And it also allowed him to know what he didn't want.
Yep.
And to ask me to I don't like that light fixture there, let's do something else. So it kind of helped direct my design decisions for him too.
We spent a lot of time talking about lighting the stairs. That's why I showed this slide here and how we were going to do that. Because the stair design wasn't complete. There's a bunch of different options to light stairways. I think you'll see some of those in here. Let's kind of run through. No, I don't have any. But there's the stair concept. We didn't quite arrive at that concept, but we arrived at something very similar. So all the treads will be lit on the staircase. We talked about that wine closet's now gone, but we talked about lighting that in the early stages. Those linear lights that kind of run up and across the ceiling was a really cool idea. So there's a long hallway in that C-shaped house, and we want to use them as sort of wayfinders for the hallway, so you can identify where the doors are to the bedrooms instead of a long dark corridor or a long corridor with recessed lights down the center of the ceiling, like most of you do. So we had a really unique design element there. We've taken that through other areas of the home as well. That's the wine room. So there's the hallway we're talking about. So that's what the hallway is going to look like when it's lit that way. This was the slide I was looking for with the different stair options, whether it's a recessed linear that runs the length of the stairs, whether it's a lighted handrail potentially, or the lit treads, but just a way to highlight what's going to be a really cool looking stair design in that property. All right, so we kind of got through step one. We touched on budget. I'm gonna drill down a little bit deeper in budget right now because I think it's important for everybody here. So Stephanie, how did you end up on the budget here? I don't want you to go through the entire process, but give me an idea. Did you stay within budget? Did you exceed the budget? I know the answer.
Just tell us that.
Well, as a designer, I probably exceeded the budget, but I always say to my clients, like, I'm going to show you the best of the best to let you know what could be there. Now, granted, I'm not going to show them something that there's no way they could ever afford, but I can always take a design that's up here and redesign it to get it back down here, just by tweaking it a little bit. So I don't know how many numbers Greg has ran on this yet because we're still working through selections, but I'm sure there's going to be areas where we have to back down a little bit. But I can easily help the client understand that it's still going to look as good. It's just a matter of maybe changing, a $15 light fixture to it's the same light fixture, but to an $8 light fixture where we're cutting it in half, but it's still a similar look.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the important question was not what my budget was, but what his budget was. And that took a while to really get to because it was a pretty wide range. This owner has the wherewithal to build whatever the heck he wants. He's got plenty of money. It's just what does he want to build in that neighborhood and that space and kind of ring it in. And like Sean said, he's a local builder in the area, production builder, but has a good sense of what overbuilding is. And so we really had to dial him in on, okay, well, where do you want to land on this project? We actually ended up pretty close. We were probably a little over, I think, the first time we ran it, and then worked with Stephanie to kind of pull some things back or just simple allowances. I mean, at this point, we don't really know what the cabinetry is going to cost, but if you have a $600,000 budget for cabinetry, you can easily just wind that back down to $500 and just start, drilling stuff or,
Easily.
Pulling stuff back like that. Because we really don't even have a selection at that point.
Right.
So,
Yep.
We're kind of still in that phase, and we've hit his comfort level. And then he may just decide to say, heck with it, let's just keep going. And that wouldn't surprise me.
No, I've had not only this client, but a lot of clients do that where they're like, well, no, that's really important to me. And a lot of times it does come down to like things like cabinetry. It's a big number. But they'll say, you know what, I don't want to back it down. Let's just go ahead and spend the extra money.
Right.
So ultimately, it's up to the client what the budget is.
So right now we're at a baseline, right, where I think we have ample, money in each of the activities, and then it's just going to be down to, some of those final decisions and where he wants to go on that.
Kevin, how do you?
Wants what he wants.
How do you start the budget process with your client?
I touched on it earlier. I think it starts with education, right? They've got to understand what lights look like, what that is, right? And then you can start to quantify what that impacts and start to add it up. And the client will tell you where the threshold is. I've found, right? Oftentimes you won't get to the end. You'll get objections along the way if you're starting to quantify it. And so they'll look at it and go, yeah, I love that linear look in the hallway. And that might add $20,000 to the hallway. But that's okay to me because I think that looks cool enough and I'm willing to spend that money on it. Similarly, in our world, we have that same conversation. We talk about, do we want traditional round square speakers that go on a ceiling, or do we want those to go away? Do we want the hidden speakers? Or do we want something that's more of a high performance and a smaller, more discreet kind of enclosure where people don't see things? And so there's layers that you go through. And I think that starts with, you mentioned earlier, discovery questions, having a conversation with the client, finding out how they intend to use the home, how they're going to live in it. Are they traveling? Is security important to them? Touching on the different subjects of what they have and starting to dig into each of those and to quantify that along the way. And then recapping that, right? When we're done, it's saying, okay, we've talked about these things. Let's look at what that impact looks like and make sure that we're on the right track so that we don't go do all this work and then come back and completely miss the mark on where we are. I think it's important to be able to kind of, just from a sales perspective, I think we all hit that from a sales perspective, is being able to, discuss what needs are, quantify values, do the design, bring it back in line with what that comes in as.
And I've also found like a lot of times a client won't give you a budget.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of it, I think, is they think, if I tell you I want to spend $1 million, you're going to spend $1 million and then some. Like, I'm using it as a guideline. I'm not using it to like upsell you product.
Right.
So there's a lot of times where you're working without a budget, and then you put that number out there, and they go, whoa, that's way too much. Let's back it down. So I always, say to every one of my clients and my assistants, this whatever, like everyone has a budget. Like I don't care how much money you have a number in your head. And how do I figure out what that number is if you're not going to give it to me?
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll just throw numbers out.
Right. Yeah.
Just randomly throw a number. If I came back with you and this is $500,000, how would you feel about that?
Right.
And then I just wait. Let them like freak out or go, oh, okay, yeah. They'll say something.
Think about it.
Yeah. Maybe we don't want to go quite that far, but let's do something in this range, right? And it can kind of help get that ball rolling off of it. So I think like your historical data.
Yeah.
The fact that you have that, I think, helps you be able to get that to them to say,
right,
where are we?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes back, for me, in the importance of the collaboration and everything that we're doing, because it's not just, we have more design professionals on this job than, probably ever had, and it's not just us at this table. There's other people involved with this. But ultimately, in a project like this, with a client like this, you just want no regrets, right? So he's going to oscillate back and forth between what he saw in London, come back and talk to you about it, talk about it in budget, and then ultimately make the decision between A and B on which direction he wants to go. And so we just all have to be on the same page and continuously communicating as those changes, come around, so we don't miss the mark somewhere. But for me, again, it's just that at the end of the day, the matched vision and expectation that the owner had of the house and what we ultimately deliver, and using him and his family along in the process to make sure that every decision is the final decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So it's interesting because when I started my design business, I identified this as probably the biggest obstacle early in the process. And I tried to find a solution to overcome it. And what I realized is that if I was building a $7 to $10, $15 million custom home and I wanted to know what technology would cost in that house, and I Googled it or I asked Alexa, I probably wouldn't get an answer. If I did get an answer, it wouldn't be an accurate answer. And I really didn't have a solid understanding of what it should cost. And as a consumer who didn't spend 30 years in the business, I'd be a little nervous that I was going to go find Kevin, and Kevin was going to tell me it's going to be $750,000 or $1.8 million worth of technology, and I don't know what I'm getting for that number. So I wanted to build a way or understand a way to take all this historical data, all this knowledge that you and I have had after 20 plus years in the business, and come up with a number really quickly. So I built a tool for myself that now I share with builders and architects and designers, just kind of get a ballpark at the table. So while we're doing that education, while we're running through all the options and all the various things we can do, I've got a 7-question survey that gets us to a good, better, and best technology budget for everything, for lighting, for shading, for audio video, for power solutions, for HVAC controls, for golf simulators, for all the pieces and bits and things that we install in these homes. So at the table with the client, I can say, well, based on what you're asking for, regardless of who the integrator is going to be, this is what you'd expect to spend for these things. So we sort of put a price tag on what these various things could cost and a range, and it's very telling at that moment. They look at those numbers, and there's always a little bit of sticker shock, but they also look at it and say, well, there's a range, right? So I understand that if I don't want to spend as much, I can get these products and services. If I want to spend more, I can get these products and services. And it's been a really useful tool to do that.
I mean, at this point, as when we're sitting down and going through this discussion, and I remember this meeting very vividly, we had no idea what his budget was. We just knew what he wanted. We had not talked to a single integrator in Central Florida at this point. He hadn't walked into anybody's dealership or anything like that. He was completely brand agnostic at this point, had no idea what platform he was using. We were just basically presenting, or Sean was presenting to him, what his range is in technology. And I thought that was pretty rewarding in a way, because we weren't really scared of this. When you could tell he kind of swallowed a little bit when you went above $1 million. But then he was like, well, okay, if that's what it's going to take, then that's what it's going to take. So I just really like this approach because it put him in that frame of mind of what technology is going to cost before somebody was trying to sell him something at a dealership, right? So that was rewarding for me.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So step 3, right, we're going to talk a little bit about pre-construction items, which is near and dear to my heart. I think this, if you're going to take a picture of a slide or remember something from this session, this should probably be the one. I'm going to throw it up there. I'm going to tell you that I made this list there are other things that go on this list. I'm not going to read these items. You can read them at your convenience. But just understand that there are things that have to happen along the way in a project to make it successful. I would bet that if all of you looked at this list and said, if I had answers to all these questions before I started building this house, it would be a whole lot easier. But look at this list. These are very difficult things to get without decisions being made along the way. So having answers to these questions is not easy. Kevin, I'll start with you. How do you get a client to the point where they understand the importance of these decisions? How do you set deadlines? How do you set requirements for them?
I would say actually it probably starts even getting the design team on board early, right? It starts with making sure that we're brought in early enough in the process so that we can affect a lot of these items. Because if we start talking about things like shade pockets, or if we're talking about things like, smaller aperture speakers and truss layouts, and making sure that the ceiling and the reflected ceiling plan is accurate, making sure that we have a landscape architect or designer included so that we're not putting cameras on a corner where all of a sudden an ornamental tree is going to be growing up in front of it, and that's not a good location after we've already put limestone up on the outside. There are things that just kind of happen along the way, and it's making sure that we get these things together early enough in the process to go through all of that. And so our biggest challenge isn't always necessarily the client. For us, it's getting involved early enough and having everybody understand that we need to have a seat at the table early in the process, right? And I think obviously that comes along with the client, making sure that they're able to make those decisions quickly, understand what those are, being able to quantify those dollars, get those on board so that they're not feeling overwhelmed along the way, because they're going to have a million decisions to make, as we all know, as they're going through this. And so being able to have the time to get that done, I think, is the most important part of it. So it's being in early, discussing this and getting them on board with that. And then being a part of the team and understand and letting us hear what the decisions are for everything else, right? It's not just technology. We need to understand, the vision on what the decorative lighting looks like and where the furnishings are going and, what are the limitations from construction. We want to make sure that we understand, is there a limitation to a drop in a ceiling? Are there concrete walls on the outside that we have to consider? And so those are all things that are incredibly important to us in addition to everybody else who's on that job site. And so we want to make sure that we're kind of ingrained into what's happening on that and have insight into what that looks like.
Yeah. You make a really good point that the detailed lighting plan bullet point at the top of this list requires 100 other things to happen. We have to understand where the furnishings are going to be. We have to understand what the client's likes and dislikes are, and what's going to be lit, and what features are going to be accented and highlighted. So, Steph, what is your
Ironically,
your
one of my first questions is, do we have an integrator on? Because especially when you're dealing with two-story spaces and whether the client wants just double shades, single shades, double shades with draperies. I have a general idea of the size of the pocket, but when you get really wide windows, how are the rolls reversing on themselves? How am I getting the drapery pockets in there? How do I need to get the trusses cut back? So before Greg and the architect are doing truss studies and permitting, I'm like, I need to cut these so I can get my pockets in. And then even, I'll continue to do a furniture plan so I can definitely know where the decorative lighting is going, where the specialty lighting going. So it's one of my, because normally the builder and the architect are on before the designer. And then I want to know, when are you coming on board? Yeah. Because again, it's collaboration. Trying to make sure everything's right so it doesn't cost the client more money, it doesn't delay the builder. If, we're like, oh, by the way, can we reframe this wall because the client now wants to do this? So I think it goes back to collaboration and communication.
Yeah, and obviously this is a big project, right? And so this one has a big number attached to it. But I will tell you, I think the story is the same no matter what level that is. Yeah. And I mean, we do projects that are $20,000 and $50,000 projects all the way up as big as they can kind of go. And so the story is the same. It doesn't cost more money to be involved early with us. You, in fact, will probably save money because we'll be in front of it. We'll know, are we doing button pass on this corner condition? Are we doing different things for window treatments? Are we building a pocket high enough so that we can do a ripple fold drapery track versus a pinch pleat? And we think through those details to make sure that we're getting this right, and it doesn't become something that's an afterthought later where you're limited on the choices that you can use or the fabric weights. And so it's just so important all the way across the board.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like we have two set of plans going too. And we use the same process, like you're saying, the same process. We always, I'm sure every custom builder in this room shares their truss drawings with their HVAC designer, whoever's doing the duct layout and stuff like that. Just like when you get into these real intricate lighting plans, you don't want lighting devices or fixtures exactly where a truss is running through the middle of a family room or something. So sharing those different layers of information that we're getting across the board with everyone so that they get an opportunity to peek at that and make sure it all comes together, I think is very important for all of this. And one thing that's not on here that I think's missed all the time is just providing enough this equipment room, but the technology room, right?
The
Where's
racking
the technology room? And,
Yeah.
And that'll vary, based on your level of sophistication that you're doing on your home automation. But just like, architects used to always forget about the air handlers. We'll stick it in the garage and we'll stick it in the attic. We can't do that anymore. It's got to be, on the floor plan somewhere. Same thing with technology, is making sure that level of project has enough space, enough room, enough wall space, whatever it needs for this technology layer.
Yeah, the shade pockets on this particular project, They started as just shade pockets, and they turned into shade and lighting pockets because there's now lighting in that pocket as well, right?
Yeah, where do you put the transformers, right?
What that allows you to do, too, is if there's some unanswered questions, you can still kind of future-proof and say, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and plan on shade pockets here in the truss design. And whether you use them or not, it won't impact the design down the road.
Yeah, because I know you can always frame them in if I go, I don't want to do them there now.
Exactly. So.
Well, we had, the other decision I thought was interesting is the amount of space between the floors that you allowed. Can you touch on that? Because I think that before you go, I think for someone on my end of the equation, you're pressing me for details that I just don't have.
Right.
I don't know what's going in that ceiling quite yet.
Yeah.
So how did you address that?
So to future-proof kind of whatever we're going to put in this floor system, we have a 32-inch floor system. So open web truss, 32-inch floor system. So we could put another bedroom in there if we wanted. I'm just kidding. But it really left that, as long as we're not going through girders that didn't have any, passage through it, or LVLs that were laminated and didn't have any passage through it. So we had a few little things we had to do in the duct design to get around some of that. But with the 32-inch floor system, it gave us a lot of, kind of a little less stress in trying to get everything exactly right. Because we know we could foam it, we know we could get ductwork in there, we know we could get wiring in there and all the other stuff. And as it turns out, we're doing a variable refrigerant flow system in there anyways, which really minimizes the ductwork too. So we'll have plenty of space in there.
Yeah.
We're doing well, but it enables us to do a lot of things by just future-proofing that floor system.
But I think the point of this session is really talking about that collaboration, and those conversations happened early, and we're not stressed about needing an extra inch here and there to accommodate a shade or a shade pocket or a light fixture, and then now we tell the client they can't have.
Yep.
So step 4, which isn't really sequential, but we'll call it step 4 anyway, is engineering and specification. And this is sort of near and dear to my heart. I know, Kevin, this is one of your things too, right? So we talked about all sorts of things, but before we can really get an apples-to-apples comparison from an integrator, right? If the client wants to look at more than one contractor to do this work for them, they have to have something to compare. And if Bravas gives them a proposal and Bravas' competitor provides a proposal, if they're not bidding on the same set of specifications, what are the chances they're going to get the same proposal?
Yeah.
Virtually zero, right? So how do we do that? And I'll get to your stuff in a minute. I think I put these out of order, so I'll talk about this first. So this is the lighting floor plan on the left-hand side that sort of corresponds to the lighting renderings that you saw earlier. And you can see how much easier it is to look at a rendering of what that looks like than looking at this plan view. But it's still really critical for bidding purposes that everyone know where these things are. There'll be transformer locations and driver locations on here. All the fixtures are specified. Behind this plan, there's a whole set of fixture specifications, even load schedules and zoning schedules and everything else that goes along with that. The upper right-hand corner there was the first pass of the mechanical space drawing, which has since changed, but it was there anyway. And you can see there's all sorts of things from panel. Greg, you've seen this before. You don't look that close.
When you say change, I'm looking at it again.
Yeah,
I was doing the same thing. I'm like,
no, this is the old
the
one.
big
This
one
is the
because
new
I can't see it on that screen.
I put this together a while ago. But there are locations for lighting panels, for electrical panels, for battery storage, for low voltage wiring and data wiring and cabling. There's equipment rack layouts and equipment rack sizes and zoning for this that's going to change over time as the client changes his mind. But these were done early on, so we had an understanding of how much mechanical space that we needed. More lighting and lighting control drawings. The one on the right-hand side is not this particular project, but you get the idea for speaker locations and network device locations. Kevin, I'll give this to you to sort of run through the Bravis engineering process and why it's so important.
Yeah, I think similar to yours, right? A picture's worth 1,000 words. We can talk about Cat6s and fibers and 22.2 and solid core firewire and all that kind of fun stuff, which I love. And if you want to talk more about that, I will talk all day about that with you. However, our clients don't, right? They want a picture. They want to be able to look at things, see what they're getting, and go through it. And so our drawings are set up to be visual, right? So they can, and frankly, it's a little self-serving because also when we start to execute things, it's really hard for me to get my own employees to read stuff anymore. They'll follow a photo or a picture. They won't necessarily always read the details on everything, but we'll go through it. We do low voltage layouts. We'll show where shades are going, where speakers are going, where TVs are going, where cell phone repeaters are, where Wi-Fi access points are. We do heat maps on that kind of stuff to make sure that all this stuff is engineered and thought through at the very beginning and not an afterthought afterwards. We're also making sure that we're not going to just plop an access point right in the middle of the family room on a very clean ceiling. We're finding how can we hide these and how do we layer those between floors. And,
I love that.
Yeah, look at all the stuff that goes to it because it matters. Just do it right? Similar to your lighting stuff, we'll do fixture layouts, lighting design, tagging it, circuiting it, showing where it all goes. Exterior lighting design as well. We know that houses are flowing inside to outside now, and so it's just a continuation of what that looks like, and that needs to be seamless. And so it's thinking through how that all kind of comes together, as well as entertaining spaces. It's not just the lighting that's outside, but it's also audio and being able to zone that properly. And so we do tons of different drawings that come through this kind of stuff. You'll see our heat map for Wi-Fi that goes on it. We do surveillance cameras to show not just what they're covering, but areas that you're not covering things. I always kind of laugh with security cameras. You watch a TV show and they zoom in from a satellite to pick a neck tattoo off of the criminal. And then you watch the evening news and someone drives into a convenience store and you can't tell if it's a man or woman. And so the truth is somewhere in between, and how do we quantify that and make sure that our clients know what they're getting before they're actually getting it. And so we go through stuff. We have standards for everything. We draw out details on if we have an art lift that goes in, how do you frame that? We want to make sure that the framer gets to go in and frame that one time. We don't want that to be something where they're starting to put up, a surface. I saw your L-shaped fireplace. We don't want an L-shaped fireplace in there, and then all of a sudden we have the wrong location for our art lift, and so we're thinking through those details very early on in the process to make sure we've got it right. And similarly, we'll draw out the rack room, we'll draw out elevations, we'll call out what we need from a power perspective, we'll call out what we need from a cooling perspective, so that the HVAC contractor knows exactly how much BTU output our stuff is putting out, so that they can put in the right cooling for that space, so that we have the right power for that space, so that we're not overloading things and making sure that breakers aren't tripping. And going through all that kind of stuff. And so those are just generally things that we do. It's not necessarily that we do all those for every project, but we do what we need to do to make sure that the project runs smoothly and that it has all that in place. So,
yeah. So I think from a consistency standpoint, just drawing, the exercise of drawing this makes you really think through the details of the project more than once, right?
And at Bravis, we have a team of people, right? We have 12 or 15 designers that's all they do every single day. And so we meet with clients, we take in, a very clear kind of normal conversational tone on what we want to accomplish. And then we turn that over to very technical people that know how to go through all that and that can put that stuff together and then bring that back out in a format that's easy for a client to understand so that we can get to the end and make sure that they understand what they're getting and that we understand what we're delivering and that everybody else in the project has the tools that they need in order to be successful while they're doing it.
And you can do a full set of drawings like this in, an hour or two?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
How long does it actually take to put this together?
It depends on the complexity and what's needed, right? How long does it take to put together a design? It can vary. Most of the time, we tell people to expect, a week or so for a turnaround time, a couple of weeks, depending on the complexity of what it is. So, yeah. And our goal is to do that faster and faster and faster and better and better.
Nice. All right, step 5. This is how you pick the integrator, and this usually isn't toward the end of the process like it's shown on this diagram. Sometimes sometimes this might be before step 1. So I don't want you to think of this as a linear timeline. But selecting the integrator is challenging, and I'd like to hear from the other end of the table here on how you sort of make those decisions along the way. I've got a slide with some things you need to do, but give me a better idea of how you choose an integrator when you bring them into the conversation. I know you work with me on this particular project, but I don't work with you on every project, so there's obviously other ways to do it.
Yeah, I mean, my approach has evolved a little bit. We used to just kind of hand off technology to the integrator and say, okay, call us when you're done and we'll figure it out. As the homes have gotten more complex, as I've been more educated through Tech Home and just coming to these things and understanding some of this stuff as well as some of the integrators do, quite frankly, my approach changed to and seeing things that haven't worked out so well. Fortunately, when you kind of have it at arm's distance and it's the integrators, you can say, oh, well, it's the integrator's fault. But at the end of the day, you're the builder. It's under your umbrella. You're responsible for all of it. And the big things that fail are just that missed expectation. And I felt like what was happening a lot of times is people would go in there and talk to an integrator who was married to a brand and did everything that they could to sell them anything from that brand without really digging in deep like we all have, with our client on this project, and what that client really wanted. What was the problem you were really trying to solve in the beginning, rather than just trying to run up a number to try to sell them some cool technology. Because at the end of the day, when they move in, a month later, 3 months later, 6 months later, when none of that stuff's working, that's a big, failure. You have this beautiful home, massive home, built well, but if they can't turn on and off the lights the way that they thought they were going to be able to do, that can be pretty aggravating. So my approach has kind of evolved where I think you should spend as much time with the owner as you can doing that lifestyle assessment, figuring out what they're really trying to accomplish with this, what their level of education is in this space, and how, to put all that together in design format before you go to the integrator. And that's kind of what we've done here.
And also on that point, making sure the client actually understands what's being said to them. Because I've had a lot of times where the client's, oh, okay, and then I'm like, the integrator will walk away and I'm like, do you have any idea what he just said to you? Mainly because you talk in different terms than the average person, you can cat fives and blah, 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 and they're like, I don't know what that is. Yeah. So I always try to I'm like, literally will say to the client, are you sure you understand? So again, it goes back to the communication and collaboration. Like, I need you to dumb it down for me. And I've literally said that before. I mean, I've been sat there and listening to it, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
If I don't know, the client doesn't know. So I'm like, can you just dumb it down a little bit? Because not everyone is tech savvy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Our clients can be incredibly smart. In most cases, they are, right? But we still have to communicate complex things in simple terms, in simple ways, in order to get it. And I think, from an experience standpoint for clients, they're not necessarily worried about how things are made or how it's done. They're just worried about how it's going to feel and how it works. Yeah. 1, that it's reliable. 2, that it's simple. And 3, that it looks beautiful. Yeah. Right? And so.
Yeah, this is a great segue. So I'll flip through these quick. I want to get to the end so we leave some time for some questions. But this is how I translate tech speak into client speak, which is that, I hear what the clients are saying. I hear what the design team is asking for. I put it into terminology that the integrator understands, how to price, and a schedule of devices and a set of drawings that go along with this, so they can provide an apples for apples comparison when they provide a proposal to the client. It's a pretty simple process when you dumb it down that way. It's hard to get there, but you're right, that translation is pretty critical. I went right off the edge of that slide there, but specification and change management, we have a whole session just on this, right? I just wanted to mention it. I don't want to talk too long about it. But keeping track of changes on a project, both visually and financially, is really, really important for the client. My change order logs have things that were proposed but not authorized, have things that were authorized but maybe not proposed. I mean, there's all sorts of data that goes into that you have to reconcile at hopefully not at the end of the project, but every phase of that project to make sure the client understands how the scope changed and how that impacted them financially and performance-wise. So all those things are pretty critical. And then the final piece, which is managing the process and managing the project, which again is another session all by itself. But Greg, you've got some thoughts on this. I know this is one of your documents, one of many.
Yeah.
How do you orchestrate this whole thing? In 1 minute or less.
Client dependent. This is our famous phase 1 selection worksheet where we want all these selections done before we start construction. We want that 100% of the time. We get it 0% of the time. At least we have a guideline and a checklist, a communication tool that says, okay, remember, all these boxes are checked, but these aren't. We got to get, this stuff going. So whether you get it, the dream would be to have it before you start construction. Unfortunately, that's just not the business I'm in and the clients I'm working with and the homes we're working with. But we try to get as far down that list as we can. And then just communicate. I mean, You know, I was on a morning huddle with my team before this morning, and they're like, hey, that car lift in the garage, what are we doing about that? I was, you know, he doesn't really know either. Go out there and look for some resources and put it in front of him and see what he says. Just start the discussion, start the process. It's not, you know, something that we want to show up one day when we're trying to pour the slab and saying, oh, okay, well, we don't have any specs on the car lift. So and that's not even on the list, car lift, by the way. So, you know, it's that constant communication, figuring out the way your client likes to communicate, wants to communicate, their level of education on any of these items, and then just keeping those doors open and communicating. For us, we really communicate, since we're cost plus, our change orders and our financial reports are updated monthly based on the billing. So they know where their trend is before we even spend the money. So there's really no surprises at the end of the day with where they end up. That's a big part of it. And then we use Construction Online, which is like everybody, it's like Coke and Pepsi, but people probably know Buildertrend around here. Construction Online is a very capable project management system that's just like that Stephanie has access to, Sean has access to. Our project managers are in there, you know, constantly updating budgets and schedules, providing specs and stuff like that, and putting it out there in that cloud environment so that people have access to it. And, you know, you can keep them, I guess,
informed,
dialed in, yes, and in that the plumber should know what Stephanie's drawings look like just as much as what the architectural drawings look like, because it's all out there. The access is out there for them to get to that information.
Nice. This is one of my documents, one of many, but I keep lists of critical decisions that need to be made and put that in front of the client so they understand where the timelines come from. So if I don't have this decision by such and such a date, which needs to happen 4 weeks before this happens, then we're not going to be able to hit that deadline. This is a responsibility matrix that I use that sort of lists all the things that I'm responsible for and who's supposed to take control of those different decisions along the way. Is it the electrician? Is it the integrator? Is it the builder? Is it the plumber? I have an understanding of who's responsible for what and make that public so everyone knows where their responsibilities lie. Programming requirements. This is something that needs to be specified early. If the client's got a vision of how the lighting control system should be programmed, it needs to be communicated to the team that's doing the programming. And it's a difficult translation sometimes from client to designer to integrator to installer to programmer to final. So that's defining that early is a nice piece of that process. And Greg, you already sort of touched on these things, but really just making sure that we control quality throughout the entire process. Right. So I think I'm going to give you the session highlights, which I was asked to do, to summarize an hour's worth of things in one slide, but there you go. And we have about a minute and a half for questions. If you have questions beyond this, we're happy to address them. I'm sure any of us panelists would be happy to address them outside of this room. Anything that's pressing right now? Yes. Yeah, that QR code right there, if you scan that and send me an email, I'll be happy to share that with you. All right.
Yeah,
I think, look, we finished with 55 seconds to spare. Awesome.
All right.
But thanks. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time and your attention. Hope you learned something today.
Thank you all.